Prepare for a Rood Awakening.
Shalom, Torah fans. This is Michael Rood on the shore of the Red Sea, or in Hebrew, the Yam Suf, the body of water that the Israelites crossed on dry land nearly 3,400 years ago. In the previous episode, we analyzed the revelation that Zechariah received concerning nuclear missiles being launched from the land of Shinar upon the land of Israel. This is not a particularly comforting reality since I live in Israel. I know that nuclear war is coming. The prophets have detailed it, and while I was flying to Israel with all my earthly belongings, the Almighty showed me the devastation in a revelation dream. On Aviv 1, 2002, the first night of the biblical New Year, a precursor to the attack was given to me in another dream. Zechariah also recorded a precursor to this war that you saw play out on television on September 11th, 2001. I watched it transpire from the lobby of an inn in the outskirts of Reykjavik, Iceland, a few hours after landing. The doors to Iceland were immediately opened to me to speak the message that I was sent to deliver. We will now explore the meaning of the two man-made mountains of brass and the releasing of the war chariots that lead to the devastation and final victory in Zechariah's thermonuclear war. Finally, I will relate the incident that took place in the end of the 1990s that brought on the time of the 10 virgins of Matthew 25 and the exposing of the evil servants whose so-called ministry is lashing out and smiting the true servants. A bitter end is in store for those who fulfill the role of a false witness in the last days. And the internet is allowing these poison-tongued orators free access to the biblically uninformed and gullible. Now, episode 10 in the 11-part series, The Sinai Connection, Israel's ancient title deed to the land. Yeshayahu said, "Behold, Damascus is taken away from being a city. It shall be a ruinous heap." Damascus has never been a ruinous heap. It has never been destroyed. It will be destroyed. It will go down. In this very section in which Isaiah is talking about this, he's talking about Israel's leaders who do wickedly against God's covenant with Abraham, and they make a covenant with death and an agreement with hell. And that the Almighty will annul their covenant with death. Every single time they make this agreement with hell, the Almighty is going to annul it, and finally, He is going to fight for Israel. This is the day that you and I live in. Now, are there any precursors to this action? Is there anything that Zechariah tells us? Does he give us any hint, any clue of anything that's going to happen around this time frame? This could be a week off. It could be 25 years off. But it's still soon. If it's 30 years off, it's not in my lifetime, but still it's going to be soon. Does he give us any more? And I turned and lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, there came 4 chariots from between 2 mountains. Chariots are implements of war, nothing else. They are not commercial vehicles. They are war machines. Israel was told, do not have chariots. All of your enemies have chariots. Do not have chariots. These are implements. They are weapons of war, pure and simple. And Zechariah sees something. He sees something in this day, the day in which you and I live, in which this is what they look like all over the earth. This is what the full page looks like in Scientific America on page 78. This is common. And he sees something that releases the chariots of war. He saw these chariots of war come out from between two mountains. And he also tells us these are not natural geologic formations. Zechariah is seeing something in his day that can only be described as mountains, but then he says, these mountains are mountains of brass. Brass is a man-made alloy. It does not occur in nature. It's a man-made alloy. These are man-made mountains of brass. Right from the beginning, in the beginning of Genesis, Bereshit, it says that Tubal-Cain was an artificer in brass. Man-made alloys. Zechariah is seeing something that can only be described as two mountains, two man-made mountains of brass, between which the war chariots are sent out, that's going to begin all of this destruction. Tell me that this is just a coincidence. Tell me that those two man-made towers, and they look like brass, that went down in New York was just a coincidence. Tell me Zechariah did not see this very incident that has shaken up and changed the face of the earth. He saw it, and you saw it too. From 1993, when Israel entered into that covenant with death, the voice of the prophets shouted out from every corner of America that judgment was coming to America. Repent and get ready. The Prophecy Club began sounding out the warning that very year. Dmitri Duduman, who came from a different culture on the other side of the world, was told specifically to come to America to sound the warning that judgment was coming to America. The Prophecy Club gave him the venue to where he could speak to America. Henry Groover, numbers of prophets spoke during that 7-year period of time, ending in the year 2000. Judgment was coming to America. Get ready. This was not the only voice. There were voices in the Messianic Jewish community that sounded the warning, judgment is coming, get ready. There were more missionaries sent to America from 1993 to the year 2000 than America was sending anyplace else on the planet. And they were not coming with some dog and pony show, some kind of religious hoopla. They were coming over here from the Philippines, which had endured great judgment at the hands of the communists. And they came over and said, judgment is coming to America. America, prepare. There was the warning that went out from engineers in the computer field that there was a 2-digit computer code problem that could completely disrupt Western civilization. Plenty of evidence for it. And the warning went out. Get ready. Finally, more people woke up. It's like entire asleep churches got Y2K compliant. They realized that just like that, things could change, and they had to be ready to minister in a time of desperation in America. Finally, the last thing was like Y2K. The prophets continued to go out and warn. Those of you who were here 4 years ago know that, even a year before Y2K, I said Y2K is moot. It is totally irrelevant. December 31st, 1999 at midnight doesn't begin a day, doesn't begin a month, a week, a year, a millennium. It's nothing on God's time clock, but it can be certainly a 2-digit computer code problem. I was just saying that the day of the Lord is what we look at. And the day of the Lord, the 7th millennium, was right biting at its heels. Everything seemed to indicate that this is the time. Wake up. Robert Scott Wadsworth toured the United States, all through the Prophecy Club. He showed us right from the scriptures that the Almighty put the stars, moon, and the sun in their courses for signs in the heavens. And he showed that in that period of time, to 1996 to 2000, The warning that was rung out from the heavens about the coming of the Messiah and judgment coming to the earth would never be seen again for 50,000 years. It would never speak so brightly and so clearly in all the history of mankind except in those years. The warning went out for everyone to wake up, and then all of a sudden it was silent from heaven. What happened? Nothing happened. Y2K. The next day, electric generators were dumped on the market by the thousands. People's stockpiles were immediately disseminated. And people who had sounded the warning for years sat there and felt like a fool. I warned my family. I warned my parents. I got everything ready myself. I got ready because they wouldn't get ready. I got ready. And now I look like a complete fool. Then he said, I'll never open my mouth again. What happened? The scriptures tell us very clearly what happened. Let's go back to the time of King Saul. The Philistines were gathered together at Michmash. If I was standing in my living room in Jerusalem, it'd be right up there. Michmash. They had 30,000 chariots, an invincible army. They were gathered together and they were going to destroy Israel. The prophet Samuel told the king to gather all of Israel together at Gilgal, just a short distance away. They gathered together and they were shaking. They were shaking. 30,000 war chariots breathing down their neck, and here they are standing around with hardly a stone arrowhead to go up against them. Remember, the Philistines made sure that there were no smiths in the land. They could make no weapons of war. They were completely vulnerable. And the prophet Samuel said, go to Gilgal and you wait 6 days, and the seventh day I'm going to come in the seventh day and I will do a sacrifice. All Israel gathered together. Saul waited. 1 day, 2 days. Finally, in the 6th day, they know that Samuel's coming the next day. They expect him. What happens? Samuel doesn't show up. Samuel delays his coming. We have no idea why he delayed his coming. It never tells us. He delayed his coming. So what did Saul do? He saw that the people began to leave. The people were afraid, rightfully so. They were shaken up. They were there. They were Y2K compliant. They got ready for this day, but now the prophet doesn't show up and there's no explanation. So Saul does the sacrifice. Right after he does the sacrifice, Samuel shows up. Says, what have you done? And Saul said, we waited for you for the appointed time. You didn't show up. The people began to scatter, so I forced myself. I forced myself and I did the sacrifice. And Samuel put his finger right in his chest and he said, you have not done the will of the Lord. The kingdom is ripped from you. And it was over just like that. Now let's compare Saul with David for just a minute. The entire army is out doing battle. David, however, is not on the battlefield. He's back in Jerusalem. And he's walking on his roof one evening, enjoying living in the city of David. And he looks down at his next door neighbor's house, Uriah, the Hittite, right next to the palace. Obviously a good and a trusted friend. He looks down there, and Bathsheba, his wife, is taking a bath up on the roof. So David sends one of his personal secretaries next door, and Bathsheba is escorted in the back door. That night, David euphemistically sleeps with her. She becomes pregnant. David knows that he's in big trouble and he's got to cover his tracks. One of his best friends and his neighbor, he has committed adultery with his wife. And now, we're going to see the result. He sends a messenger out to the battlefield. Uriah is brought back in. David sits him down in the palace, serves him some wine, and inquires about the battle. Talks to him about the logistics of the entire situation. And then he keeps him long enough to where he says that you can't travel at night. Go home, comfort yourself with your wife, and tomorrow go back to the battle. So Uriah walks out of the king's palace, and as he stands on the king's porch, he looks over at his house. And he says, my men are out in the field. They're cold. They're bloodied. They're hurt. How can I leave my men in the field and go home and comfort myself with my wife, with my men who are back there in bad situation? He laid right down on those cold marble steps and went to sleep that night. In the morning, when David's servants told him that Uriah did not go to his home, David called him in, and he wrote on a scroll. He sealed it up with a signet and had Uriah deliver it to the commanding general. The commanding general opened it up, read it in private, and it said, put Uriah in the forefront of the battle. When the counterattack comes, withdraw from him and let him be killed. David had a good friend, a man who was much more noble and disciplined than himself, murdered because he committed adultery with his wife. Yet, he didn't lose the kingdom. David wanted to bring the Ark of the Covenant from Shiloh to the city of David, where he had erected a tent for it himself. Even though David was not a priest, David gathered all of Israel together at Shiloh, where the Ark of the Covenant was there with the tabernacle, and David brought along a brand new ox cart. They put the Ark of the Covenant on the ox cart, and then he had all of the praise and worship leaders from all the surrounding communities join in a hoopla as David danced, bringing in the Ark of the Covenant. As the ark was traveling on this ox cart, one of the ox stumbled, and Uzzah, a faithful priest, reached out to steady the ark because it was being dislodged from the cart. He reached out, and wham, he was killed dead right on the spot. David was offended. And later it says that David did bring the ark up, but he did it in due order, in due course, because then he had the priests carry it on their shoulders like he was supposed to. He had no permission to do his own dog and pony show. No matter how religious and how spiritual he thought he was disobedient, and a man, an innocent priest, doing his job, doing the best he could, died because of his disobedience. And David didn't lose the kingdom? Why? In every situation, David was called a man after God's own heart. Why? When he was confronted with it. When Nathan the prophet put his finger in the chest of David and said, you are the man. You are the man who have committed adultery. You are the man that killed Uriah. He confessed. He repented. He sought God with tears. He knew that he was wrong. And no matter how badly he messed up, he repented. And the Lord said that David was a man after his own heart. But what about Saul? Saul was expecting the prophet to come in the seventh day, the Sabbath day. When he delayed, Saul took it in his own hands. He did a sacrifice. Not particularly a real bad sin. You know, the people were starting to leave. But when Samuel said, what have you done? He railed on him. We waited for you. Now you come in after I've done the sacrifice, and I haven't done the will of the Lord. We waited for you and you didn't come. You delayed. You didn't do what you said you were going to do. We expected you. And so I forced myself. I didn't want to do it. And he railed on that servant of the Almighty. He smote his fellow servant with the words of his mouth. He said, it's your fault. It's not my fault, it's your fault. His delay exposed something in Saul's heart that showed that he was unfit for the kingdom. That's what the delay did. It exposed an evil in Saul's heart. The very same thing that happened on Mount Sinai. Moses delayed his coming. Do we know why? No, he delayed his coming, and it exposed the evil in the hearts of the people, and they said, okay, I'm tired of waiting. We're not going to do it God's way. We heard his commandments, but now we're going to build a golden calf. As for this Moses, I have no idea what's become of that joker. Aaron, build us a golden calf. It exposed evil in their heart. They were supposed to leave Egyptian sun god worship on the other side of the Yam Suf, the Red Sea. They were supposed to be baptized in the Red Sea and leave it all behind, but no. All they had to do was have a disappointed expectation, and they slipped right back into pagan worship. Join us again next time for the final episode of the 11-part series, The Sinai Connection, Israel's ancient title deed to the land. This is Michael Rood at the Yam Suf bidding you shalom, peace, and I will see you when the smoke clears.